With tears of blood painted on their faces, protesters in Yangon mourn those killed for demonstrating against the coup. This as they mark 2 months since the military power grab that plunged Myanmar into crisis.
We are very sad for our fallen heroes and protesters who are still fighting the military, but we will never give up.
The legal team of deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi Thursday announced that she has been charged with violating the country's colonial-era Officials' Secrets Act. She's been detained since February 1st and has also been charged on 2 other accounts and has been accused of bribery. It's a crisis that's now spilling outside its borders. For the first time in more than 20 years, Myanmar military fighter jets attacked Kachin ethnic army-held areas near the Thai border. Those attacks during the past few days sent thousands of civilians across the border into Thailand seeking safety and medical attention. It also prompted the strongest reaction yet from the Thai government on the coup next door.
Thailand is gravely troubled by the reports of more casualties among the Myanmar people. During this past weekend, we reiterate our call for the exercise of utmost restraint, the escalation of situation, end to violence, and further release of detainees.
Some of the ethnic army groups have denounced the coup, throwing support behind the protesters, and have even called for an increase in attacks on Myanmar's military. Most have spent years fighting for greater autonomy. The UN envoy on Myanmar has warned of a civil war if the situation does not improve. Some feel that not only is there already a civil war in Myanmar, but on 2 fronts, the streets and the ethnic territories.
I do think what we're in now is a situation of 2 civil wars. One which is 2 months old, and it's what the military started when they staged a coup. So it's a civil war with the entire country. And then there's the second civil war, which has been going on for 7 decades, which is against a lot of these ethnic armed organizations.
As protesters in Yangon burned copies of the 2008 Constitution that gave deep powers to the military, a parallel government has been set up by deposed members of parliament, mostly from Aung San Suu Kyi's former governing NLD party. They have called for a federal democracy that would include the ethnic armed groups. Scott Heidler, Al Jazeera.
Campaigners are warning that with the intensifying crackdown, some protesters are being pushed into joining armed groups. The Karen National Union is one of the largest among Myanmar's almost 20 armed groups. Known as the KNU, it represents ethnic minority Karen communities that border Thailand. It wants self-determination for its people in that region. The KNU's military wing waged an armed rebellion against the military for nearly 70 years. A ceasefire agreement was signed in 2012. And now hostilities have reignited following February's coup, and the KNU is preparing its fighters on several fronts. Last week, military jets launched airstrikes on KNU territory for the first time in 20 years. The KNU has also responded to protesters' calls for support by sending fighters to protect them, attacking military positions and cutting off their supply routes. Ismail Wolf is the regional director with the human rights organization Fortify Rights. He says the decision to turn to the ethnic groups for training is born out of frustration.
This is a culmination of 2 months of brutal crackdown by the Burmese military, the Myanmar military, against unarmed civilians. So it's not necessarily an unexpected development, but it is concerning. And I think the impacts are great in the sense, not just in terms of whether the civil disobedience movement and protesters may start seeking to turn to more extreme methods to resist the coup, but also what we're seeing there is this sort of extension of the fighting out into the ethnic areas. You've seen that the sort of de facto or parallel government under the name of the CRPH put forward its constitution, and it's really trying to seek to bring in the ethnic armed groups that have long had these long-standing tensions, some ceasefire agreements, and they've all lapsed actually over the last few weeks. So there's concern, as has been raised already, that this may escalate and then we'll see increased fighting, and that's going to in the ethnic areas, but that's also going to have a severe impact on the safety and security of the wider population. So this is an escalation from the military side. The concern, I think, for the military will be that they could see themselves opened up on many different fronts, and that it really is not just a concern, as you say, for the military, but also for the entire population, as I said before. So there are very deep concerns. I think the military may not have predicted such a potentially unified response against the Tatmadaw and this coup.